Could I please have everybody can call the meeting to order with a flag salute? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, could I ask for a motion to accept the November 7th agenda? Mrs. Woods, and second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, at this time, community open forum. Earl, do we have anything? No? Okay, so we'll move on to item D, capital project update. I'll turn this over to Mr. Caladuco to do the introduction.
And I would like to welcome Kurt Narber to the podium from King & King. The floor is yours.
Look at that. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
There we go.
All right, so what we're going to do today is talk to you about where we are with the capital project as it stands regarding the most recent referendum. We have some phasing ideas we want to talk about with you all, and so that everybody knows what the big picture is. I apologize, I just got done teaching at SU for 3 hours, so I'm starting to lose my voice. But all right, so last we left, we saw the overall scope of work at all the buildings that were part of the referendum. And leading up to that, you know where to find me. Leading up to that, we had identified all the work at the buildings and then talked briefly about the team effort, this big team effort between the district and Turner and us, trying to come up with a game plan to make sure that we can manage the work given the supply chain issues, the issues with labor, and the time frame that is needed to make sure that we could start doing some construction work next year, which also includes having to put something in the SED for approval. So out of all of those discussions, post-referendum, what we did is we took and broke it up, the entire project into these 2 phases. So the first phase is up on the screen. This was submitted last month to SED. We will have approval beginning of the year, and then we will move right into bidding, which will allow us to start this work in the spring and summer of 2023. So the first phase of work is what's listed up there on the site work component with the student parking lot, including rooms for the high school, and then the middle school work is identified. And then if you recall, I'm going to come back to Hasty Mallory in a second, but CSI, we needed to do the roof there for a while. CSI is an incredibly important asset for the district as we look to future projects, because we can use that building and have been using it for swing space for educational needs, which allows us to get much better pricing and accomplish work that we typically wouldn't be able to do if we had to work around the schools all the time. So the CSI is an incredibly important piece of this puzzle. Hasty Mallory has a tremendous amount of work that's going to happen in the building, and similar to other renovations that we've done in the past, we're going to need to vacate that building for a period of time to accomplish that work without it affecting the educational needs of the students and the staff. I will come back to that. Phase 2 is all the rest of the work, which includes the laundry list of all the items at the high school, a little bit of work at the stadium, the maintenance building, and the middle school, which the big one at the middle school in phase 2 is the reconstruction of the main road and the additional drive. And then the other big component is a pole, which has a similar amount of work to Hasty Mallory that I will also come back to in just a moment. And then we have Brewerton Elementary, Miller Hawk, and bus garage work. Before move on. Does anybody have any questions about the pieces and parts of all the scope that we're doing? Okay. This is the most important piece. And I thank everyone for putting this all together. Let's see. There we go. All right. So we tried to come up with a game plan here for us first, but also to be able to convey this to you all, how best to translate this into something that graphically people can understand when you don't know exactly everything that's happening. So this is the master schedule up above. By month are these boxes for each of the years, 22 to 25. Phase 1 work, the design work started in earnest right when we finished with the referendum and we had a successful project. We've been working on the project work up to and including when we submitted to SCD last month, and we will continue to make modifications based on the SCD review up until we bid this, which will be in early spring, which is denoted by this blue box here. Like I said before, the work will begin in the spring, and as always on all the previous projects, what we will do is we will, working very closely with Paul and the district, we will work on a game plan for the components of work and where we can start some of that as long as it doesn't affect teaching students and staff during the school year. So probably some of the site work will begin more than likely in the spring, and then some of the other components that we don't have to worry about affecting any of the other things. The big item to look at is Hastings Mallory. And we are proposing that come the close of the school year in 2023, that we move that entire building to CSI for the 2023 to 2024 school year. That will allow us to get the contractors into Hastings Mallory to do all of that work in there. And that's an amazing approach that we can be very happy with the ability to be able to get that work done and then move everyone back at the end of the school year in 2024 in the summer so that they can start the new school year back in that building. You'll notice that down below with phase 2, we had to line up all of this work so that when Hastings Mallory moves, back to their building out of CSI, that coincides with the time that AA Cole will then vacate their building and move to CSI for the 24-25 school year. And then that will similarly, with a different scope, allow us to be able to renovate that building in that time frame. So all of these pieces and parts of the scope had to line up nicely so that we could accomplish that kind of continuum of work with these two different phases. So that's really the big item that we wanted to talk about today with the board, to give you an update on that option and approach, so that when we get to bidding phase 1, we have all of this sorted out. We can identify this phasing of work to the contractors over that schedule. Chris or Pat, Paul, do you guys have anything to add?
I just think that Hastings Mallory has an enormous abatement project. All the mechanical systems, for the most part, is coming out of that building, the doors, the classroom, you're replacing the septic system, you move that parking lot, so there's some major activity there. A hole that all the partition walls coming down, we have a structural problem, they don't go to recognize, so there's some major scopes in the building, so having the ability to move this forward really helps us, manage the project, more favorable, so we got some more work.
Kurt and I also mentioned, included in a letter to all the parents for Hastings community on Friday. I wanted them to know that CSI was part of our last capital safety and security project, so it's even 100 times better than it looked when we utilized the swing space from North Hawk. So we walked down there, Paul, Aaron, myself, I know Chrissy Smith has walked down there, the locked-in vestibule that was never there before when we were there. It's beautiful. All the site work in front, that with the concrete looks amazing, the film on the windows. So it is a huge savings for the district that we're not having to lease and boss kids to try to find another, location. So just wanted to say that too.
So really, that's where we're at with all of the work. Phase one, Turner is actually updating the estimate for the phase one work based on the SED set of documents that we submitted for approval. Over the next few months prior to bidding, we'll be finalizing the phasing of all that first phase of work. And then that will be leading us right around the time of the end of bidding will be about the time that we'll be looking at submitting the phase two work to SED, and then we'll just continue that discussion right into the work and the phasing for phase two. Questions?
So I just wondered, when we originally put the referendum out, I don't know if we mentioned using the schools as swing space. I know all of us who've been on the board for a while recognize that that was a potential option. Was the scope of the project expanded with the savings from that, or was that taken into account right off the bat, that we would not have to extend the project out to avoid, students being in the building and things like that?
I think that given the trajectory of the economy and the place we are right now, pricing by itself is tremendously difficult to manage on its own. I'm not going to speak for Turner, but I know that in the course of discussing this project, we knew that our only opportunity to be able to do this amount of work, given the budget that we had, was to be able to find any efficiencies that we could to kind of edge off some of the inflationary and material costs and labor cost issues that everybody's facing right now. So I think for us, we always went into it eyes wide open that we were going to need to do this to be able to make that work. So there wasn't necessarily any savings to be achieved. It was more that was part of the puzzle. And I don't know if you guys have been.
So the building access was a big part of this. Maybe utilize CSI helpful, that's kind of the long-range plan for those terms. Unit ventilators for 35 weeks, air handling units are going for 40+ weeks, so we have to look at how this is going to impact us with lead time. We know we're looking at the same building on time. We would never get this equipment in a short summer. We would summer out, in that construction. Right, so from that perspective, it's kind of this is the way we work.
So I think it's safe that we brace ourselves. It's not going to be like the 2017 referendum where we came under bid so much that we were able to hit all those other projects. Where now they're saying the average house that's going right now for $750,000, 6 years ago, that's a $300,000 house. So what you're seeing right now when you're putting things out to bid, you're obviously seeing those patterns, correct?
We are, but you also have to remember that we've been experiencing this collectively for the last 2 years. So we built in, as you remember from back pre-referendum, we have some pretty hefty risk factors in there for contingency, escalation, and other things to hopefully protect us, given all the unknown circumstances in the environment we are. So anything that we're talking about with CSI and moving complete buildings out is only going to help us achieve what we have already planned.
Yeah, like perfect example, what you're saying is the Brewerton roof, we didn't foresee the $175,000 once you got up into it, right?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Always good to see everyone. Thank you for the water.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Aaron.
Hi, everyone. All right, so we are going to start with beginning of the year data, and this is all aligned to that first goal that Tom presented, I think it was at the last board meeting on instructional engagement. So we're gonna get right to it. So the format looks a little bit different because the one that I showed last year at middle and end had scores to compare because it was comparing beginning of the year to middle of the year and then middle to end. So this is just
what we start with. So this is our baseline, and this is the composite score, which is what the building's goals are set to. So for all of our kindergarten classes, we like to shoot for 85% of the kids to leave at grade level, at or above grade level. So all the buildings have that as their goal for kindergarten. The other grade levels are, when I get into the other subtests, are dependent on where their cohort from last year ended the year to how the principals set their goals. So each building is different in that makeup. So this again compiles all of those subtests, if you want to call them that at the top, to get their composite score. So you can see that Cole is right now, at or above is 33%. So these are the kids who are walking in at kindergarten. This is what the buildings are starting with. So this you missed last year. I didn't do a beginning of the year one. We just started at mid-year. So you're seeing very raw data right now. Brewerton is 33. So Brewerton and Cole have the same percentage of students that are at or above right now when you take into all of those subtests. Hastings is 23 and Miller Hawk is 14%. So Steve, I don't know if that's what you were emailing, if this was the slide, or we can get into that after, but.
Yeah, because so the first 27 students are at 45% of the goal.
Yes, so when you take into account all of those subsets, Cole right now has 27 kids, or 45% of their population is right now, when they average all those parts together, are well below
Okay,
average. So that's what that means. Yep.
okay.
And it could be one of these sub-tests areas that brings them down, you know what I mean? So it just depends. So this takes all of them into account. I show you the two that we are really paying attention to because we don't progress monitor letter naming fluency, but that's something that comes into account and kind of can be a predictor of student success with reading. But we look at the phoneme segmentation or the phonemic awareness part of learning to learn to read, because if they can't manipulate sounds and hear sounds, as they get into harder texts, then they're going to struggle. So this is the foundation of learning to read. So you can see that for this one, you've got Cole down there that's at 48%. Again, Brewerton is at the same 48%. Hastings Mallory is 46, and Miller Hawk is 32 of students who are at or above. So we want to make sure that these, what we'll gauge at mid-year is to see if these reds and yellows, the percentage of those shrink and the greens and blues increase. So that is the ultimate goal. And this is a big focus of instruction this first half of the year. So I would anticipate that does move.
Well, and I think that this is, I'm sorry, I'm going to have kind of a conversation here. But I think, so, I mean, you're getting a population into kindergarten, right? You know, some of them attended preschool. It'd be interesting, I'm not asking for the numbers, but it'd be interesting. But these are how your population's showing up, right? So this is your baseline, this is how they're showing up. And to me, it just leads to a great evaluation of where and how that year is progressing and then how the year ends. As far as here, because you could say, well, you got 17% of a Cole are beyond 85%, right? So 17% of the kids shown in have already met the goal, right?
For this particular stuff, yeah.
For that particular one. But if it's a key indicator for you, then to me that's a great, you know. So, you know, is there? You go down to Miller Hawk. I thought that was interesting. Only 4%, right? So.
Are above, the blue is
Are
above.
are above, right? So you got, to me, you'd have a little heavier lift, right, eventually.
Yep, and what we'll have, and so I have the EPK information, so that's going to be a piece that I share with my EPK teachers, because when I got the information to put all of this into our sheet that we use for AIS purposes, I noticed that Hastings had, I think it was 96% of their kids at leaving pre-K to kindergarten scored at the at or above. So of the 36 kids, so
You beat me to it because, you know, it's the work that you're doing in pre-K, right? What's the dividend, right? So you get that big of a jump. So, you know, if you have limited resources, where do you really want to apply them, right? You want the pre-K, right? I mean, it's.
yeah, so of those 36
early
kids that,
intervention, and it's, you know, they're off the street, so that was gonna be my next
Yeah.
question. But to me, that's a great sell, right? Oh, it's really expensive. Well, here's the results. The results aren't bad, doesn't matter. Kindergarten. You've already met. You're beyond it. You've met where we want you to be, right? Because at the end of the day, at the end of the third grade, 85% of the kids are reading at a third grade level, right? That's a win. That's FM numbers. I mean, I'm just gonna come out and say it's FM numbers.
so that's what so that's gonna be my agenda item for a UPK meeting.
You know, different than when I attended high school, I did my homework. But
So this is, the, taking the ability to take sounds and put them together. So if they saw a nonsense word and it was maybe, I don't know, bot, they would go bot, and then put it together. So for kindergarten kids, this is kind of, do they have their letter sound correspondence? So when they see a letter B, do they know that it says book? So that's what this shows you, is how many of those words the kids can get through in a minute. So you see that those percentages are there. The next slide. So in first grade, you're gonna see this in a minute. My focus this year is gonna be on the words read correctly. So if the kids on that correct letter sounds go bot, they get credit for each correct letter sounds because they have this sound for each letter. But if that student can look at that nonsense word and say bot, bid, whatever those words might be, they're gonna get credit for both, but they're gonna get more credit for the words read correctly because they're able to take all those letters in their brain and just read it, and that lets us know when they're readers, because readers don't sound everything out, they sound things out when they come across a word that they stumble on. So that's the point where we know that we've got kids that are really kind of ready to get into some texts.
So if you go back, I'm going to apologize, but I'm not going to apologize. So if you look at the kindergarten, right, no blue, right? But then we flip to, because to me this is indicative of your Miller Hawk instruction, and then you go into the first grade going into the year, right? So you click at the head, you got 25% on Miller Hawk, right? So we're making a big jump. So it's it's a reflection of kindergarten,
Correct.
right?
Mhm.
Great instruction happening, and we are making them blue.
Right, and
Right.
a lot right now, the kids in kindergarten don't start really getting into what the letters say or the sounds until end of November, beginning of December. So this is their raw information, what they have coming into us. So this is what we start with, and this is where we move from.
Yeah, no,
Yep.
it's great.
So then you get into kindergarten, or first grade, and again, this is the composite, so this is all of those components that make it up. And they've got a few extra because they got the word reading fluency up there, so those high frequency words, to look at those and be able to read those quickly in a minute, because the kids have been taught them. So on the first one, that's not one of the composite scores. So you can see these scores, and this is a reflection of last year's kindergarten group. The norms change, right? They increase in difficulty, but I've got those scores for this next one. So here is that phoneme segmentation, which again continues to be a focus at the primary because it just gets harder. The manipulation does of the sounds, but you can see very little red because that was it's such a big focus at kindergarten. So again, correct letter sounds. So last year, our kindergarten cohort, I went back in and I found this information. So last year, at the end of the year, so the data I showed in June, showed that Cole had 68% of their kids at or above the kindergarten scores, kindergarten kids last year, 68%. So they had 14 students that were blue or green, which equated to 68%. Brewerton had 21 students, which was 89%. And right now, the first grade kids have, is that 15 down there and 6? And then there was 26 kids at Hastings Mallory, and then 25 at Millard Hawk. So the numbers dipped a little bit, but still not, for new set of data after coming off of summer, I'm not too worried about that. And then this is that new one that I explained, the ability to read. So last year, Cole had 57% of its kids, kindergarten kids. Brewerton had 80%, Hastings had 73, and Millard Hawk had 66. So when you take the blue and the green, that's kind of where we're at. Or that's the numbers this year. So this is what we want to continue to move, because this is where they're going to be really reading. So I'm going to be excited. This is the one that I'm going to be really watching this year. And then for second grade, I'm going to be watching closely the oral reading fluency, because we want to make sure that these foundational skills that we're teaching at K1, because they're now into and really reading books. So that's going to be the focus, is that fluency part. So here's where we're starting. So the composite, again, takes into account the same ones that first grade had. And then that maze, this is their first year where they have that maze. That's the vocabulary and comprehension part. So they get like a closed passage, and they have to understand what they're reading and what the words mean to know what's the right word to select. So this is their first go at it. Not super bad.
Yeah, there was more red last year, wasn't there? There was.
And then this is the 4th and 5th grade as a district. So that's the dibbles for the elementary. Then we were able to, now that the data is no longer embargoed, so we were able to work with Shelley Hiltz from BOCES to get us this data that we looked at. So these were, I know Tom talked about the number of refusals. So this is what we had, grade level, and then ELA and math. So we sent out a letter before state testing happened, letting parents know when state testing was going to happen, the dates, and all of that. That was, and we didn't publicize it because we didn't want to have like that big opt-out movement again. So once parents knew when these were, that's why you see some of those numbers increase for math, because the math is after ELA. So the middle school did a great job of trying to get in touch with parents who sent in a letter on day 2 saying that your child's already taken day 1, let us finish, and then, so they really did, Jeff King did a great job of contacting those parents and convincing them. And, some of the kids, and when they ask why, it's like, well, my son or daughter didn't want to take it. So that's the fight that we're fighting right now. So these are the breakdown of students based on the subgroups, because we're trying to divide out the special ed students and how much growth they're making, because we want them, the expectation is that they also grow, and then the gen ed students. So that number at the top is all of the 3rd grade kids, and then you can break it out into those different subgroups. So you've got 3, 4, 5 on this slide. Here's 6, 8, and this is just ELA. And what Shelley got us for Tom for some cohort data is, and we can almost present this next time because it's done, is the 3-year data set so that you can see, well, it doesn't look great up here. When you look at it over the 3 years, it did, our kids did make growth, so. And this is the first year of, that test after COVID, really. So this is our new baseline, because last school year, not last school year, the school year before, the 2021 school year, they took them, but they took day 1, and the test, at least one of the readings at each grade level was one that the teacher used it as a practice. It was the practice exam. Like our 3rd graders, they're like, wait a minute, didn't we just practice with this one? So it was the kids noticing that. So, so that's why that data is like, no, it's no good. But this is our new baseline. So this is what we're looking at coming off of COVID, and hopefully if we get those dropout or the opt-out numbers down, this will improve a little bit. So you see our math, same layout. We have a little bit more success with math. With our students, you see some more kids with our special ed population 3s and 4s. Sometimes math is a little bit, the concepts they can catch on to a little bit, where the reading comprehension is a struggle if they have to, if they're not a student who qualifies for a test read. And then this is the 6th through 8th results. In our 8th grade, and I've got this on the next slide, we have students who take the math regions, so the algebra regions. So there, where you see only 1% of kids got a 4, those high kids who would typically be your 4s in other grade levels took the algebra region. So that data, though, does count for us for the SF plan and things like that, because that's part of the, they're your advanced kids, so how do they perform? And here's those results. So we had 57 of those 8th grade kids take the algebra regions in June. And that's how they performed. Any questions?
I just want to thank you. To me, it's important, and I think that we'll see the numbers. It'll improve and get better.
Thank you, Aaron. Move on to item D, personnel. Can I have a motion to accept personnel? Mrs. Wood and Allison. All in favor? On to item F, consent agenda. Can I have a motion to accept the consent agenda? Allison, second. Mrs. Wood. All in favor? I'm going to go on to item G. We'll start with Mr. Stevens. Do we have anything fun?
Not fun, but I do have some. First, I must say I'm devastated to hear the report from the comptroller regarding the surge in drug and specifically opioid-related deaths across the state. Obviously, with an increase in deaths, that means an increase in use across all demographics. With the surge being recorded since 2019, we can clearly see that the pandemic played at least some role, including the impact on mental health it had, which led to an increase in experimentation with drugs. Mental health and substance use are 2 areas of focus this year for me with trying to figure out what to explore. A substantial majority of students I've talked with are unaware of the resources that we have in this field in our school and what we're set to have. And I can't blame them for not knowing this, because I too only know very little about the individuals in our schools students can go to regarding issues about mental health, substance use, and more. It's kind of my goal and frankly my promise to work towards increasing visibility and awareness for these resources, along with working to expand said resources so we can not only save lives but improve the lives, which we'll hopefully see reflected within our schools. And we shouldn't have to wait for crisis or tragedy to work on these issues. Each student has their own battles every day, and it's our job to show that we are there for them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Board members, any reports from any board members? I will say, I went to Field Ed Joe nice day. But it was actually nice weather, that's what was the biggest part, but not very well, there's lots of people there. Besides that, that's all I have, Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
I actually saw him, it's all he did was eat, just so you know.
I did. I ate a lot of the food. It was delicious. The marching taco was classic. I agree. I echo what Matthew has stated, and it's not electronic. So I do the superintendent hearings. I'm averaging about 2.5 superintendent hearings a week, drug related. And every one of those, we provide the Farnham counseling as an opportunity to substantially reduce the further suspension when it comes to the drugs, because we want them to be in front of our drug and alcohol counselor, and the parents are great with that, because they know that there's about an 8-month waiting list if they were to try to get Farnham, and co-pays outside the district, we pay for that. But where it is frustrating is that we did a great job getting this out. I tweeted it out, we blasted it out. Damon Villeneuve, one of our great assistant principals at the high school, and Officer Jamie Castro presented again on a Red Hawk University session about drugs, and there were 13 people that in attendance. Out of the 13 people, I would say 9 of them are staff members. So we put this out there for the parents. We give opportunities. It was at 7 p.m. at night because we wanted to make sure that they got rid of, double everything they got rid of, or had to take care of their kids and whatnot. But we don't see those. And I'm one that makes excuses because I get it. People are busy and whatnot. But I guarantee you, if that was a presentation about getting rid of class rank, I would have had 600 people on there. And I'm saying this not to draw a line in the sand or call any parents out, but we are facing across the country right now a pandemic that is 100 times worse, 1,000 times worse than the COVID pandemic. What we are seeing with the opioid crisis. We have kids that are ingesting stuff through these dab pens, and they have no idea what's in there. And some of them are being rushed to the hospital and whatnot. So what I share with parents, and one father actually called me out. He paused the superintendent hearing so he could look it up himself. When I said that they were putting fentanyl in vape pens, then he thanked me because he just Googled 3 quick things and he couldn't believe that it is true. Surgeon General has put something out. So that's like you die when you take fentanyl in most cases. And so when you see these parents who are in tears, because for a lot of them, their kids never got into drugs, and then during the pandemic, they started dabbling with things, and they bring these dab pens that you can put anything into. And so we do have some experts. Part of that presentation had a Farnham counselor that was there to be able to answer questions. And some parents asked some really good questions on there and then further connected with them afterwards. But I'm glad, Matthew, that is a focus of yours, because we've had previous school board student members take on things like student depression, anxiety, and mental health. And I give shouts out to Logan Foster, Reagan Parada, that were student board members that really kind of took that mission on. So I'm glad that that's a focus, because if there's some things that you think as a student rep and talking to students that we need to do a better job, even though we think that we're doing as much as we can, we're all ears with that. So I thank you for taking that on. Other things, the PTO at Brewerton Elementary donated a double foursquare for the students at Brewerton Elementary. It was approved by the Board of Education back on August 8, 2022. Our grounds workers excavated and moved the stone into place, and the paving company will be here this week to lay the 20 by 46 asphalt pad. After that, the maintenance crew will paint, backfill, put some topsoil, and seed. The 4 squares will be ready for use in the spring. And I've got 2 kids, and all the neighbor kids are in my driveway marking it all off. That is a very popular thing. The One Act Play Festival was held this past weekend. It was absolutely wonderful. I went on Saturday night at 7 p.m., and it was fantastic. The 2 one-act plays were Our Place by Terry Gibbard and This Is a Test by Stephen Grant. Our PVM students were remarkable in their roles and were led by Mrs. Heather Gulo and Mr. James Burton. Veronica Guzman and Ethan Fink, both seniors at PVM High School, were the student directors and producers. Another great leadership opportunity. The production was also assisted by Mrs. Kirsten King, one of our technology department staff members, and we thank all of them. The athletic department also has some good news. Varsity football team played for the Independent League Championship, and although they lost a heartbreaking game by a single point, I believe it was 13-12, I was there. That was, when was that, Friday? Yeah, that was Wednesday at Fulton. I sat right behind the flock, and they were, again, extremely well behaved. It was a heartbreaker. Fulton, we were winning all game. Fulton threw a 40-yard pass in the end zone. Kid dove, caught it. We'll remember that the rest of his life. But our players, they played phenomenal. They had a wonderful season, a really wonderful season, winning season, and they were playing in the championship game. The team finished the season 6-3 overall this year. The girls varsity volleyball team finished with an overall 11-6, which was their best finish in SCAC since its inception. The team lost a very competitive sectional semifinal to JD. Both the girls and boys soccer program once again qualified for sectional play, and although both lost, they played very competitive games. Winter sports participation is much higher this year than it was last, and we are looking forward to an excellent athletic season. The field band home show was held on October 22nd with 19 bands present, and it was delicious food. That ends my superintendent report.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else before we go on to the next thing? Item H, we're going to take it as an entirety, which is independent athletes, second reading of district policies and student trips. All in favor? Or, can I get a motion first? Mrs. White? Second? Allison? All in favor? And item I, adjournment. Can I get a motion to accept adjournment? No one else? Sorry, White. Second? Christie? All in favor? And that's the end of the show. It's 7:14.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Everyone, happy Thanksgiving, by the way, since I will not see you guys until December.